People often say that Hong Kong is an international financial center. Who says that? Is it true just because you say so? It is stated in Article 109 of the Basic Law of Hong Kong. So, what exactly are financial markets? In fact, financial markets serve multiple functions, remember. Finance is all about money. What does it include? First, if you don't have enough money, you need to borrow. This is called capital raising. Going public also involves raising capital and money. Investing, on the other hand, means lending money to others when you have it. Therefore, you either have money or you don't, and you will engage in these two activities. What other functions do financial markets have? They include the facilitation of cash and capital flows, capital and investment protection, hedging, safe custody, security, speculation, insurance, and so on. The financial market offers a variety of products and services. Let me help you remember them. The market provides various products and services based on its functions. Products include debt securities, equity securities, and derivatives. What are these? Examples are gold market products, money market products, and securities. What are securities? They may include stocks, bonds, notes, options, and these are collectively called securities. As for services, examples are financial advising, which means you pay someone and they provide you with advice about the financial market. This is called financial advising. Another example is investment and portfolio management, which involves managing your funds and investments. This also belongs to the category of financial services. Also, you often receive phone calls offering loans, which is lending, encouraging you to borrow money or buy insurance. These are also examples of financial products and services. After talking for so long, why is there a need for regulation in the financial market? The first reason is that the financial market is becoming increasingly complex. Why is it becoming more complex? To put it simply, the variety of financial products in the market is growing. So, would you say the financial market is becoming simpler or more complex? Of course, it is becoming more complex. That's why there is a need for regulation. The second reason is that the flows of very large amounts of wealth has increased, which requires regulation. The third reason is the proliferation of malpractices. For example, there are instances of improper sales, coercion, and deception, which necessitate regulation. So, is Hong Kong's financial market really a free market? Keep in mind that although Hong Kong is known as a free market, there are many regulations within it. So, in fact, it's hybrids, a mix of controlled and free market economies. How can the functions of Hong Kong's financial regulatory authorities improve market quality? Remember, the mindset of financial regulatory authorities is similar to Hong Kong's civil servants. The more you do, the more mistakes you make. The less you do, the fewer mistakes you make. So, do you want to do more or less? Of course, it's better not to do too much. Therefore, how can Hong Kong's financial regulatory authorities achieve the goal of improving market quality? That is, by encouraging industry self-discipline, which means not doing it by themselves, but asking others to do it. Now, let's see how they encourage. First, encouraging the development of new products and services. The key word is encourage, but not done by the financial regulatory authorities. Second, helping to improve the quality and skills of financial market professionals. Remember, it is helping, which means assisting, not the regulatory authority providing the education needed. Third, helping to create a knowledgeable investing public by means of investor education programs. Again, it's helping, also when they are responsible for educating investors. If something goes wrong, it is the investor's responsibility, not the responsibility of the regulatory authorities. So remember, the more you do, the more mistakes you make. The less you do, the fewer mistakes you make. What are the common objectives of various financial regulators in Hong Kong? To make the following objectives memorable, we have to remember that real objectives are those that are challenging to achieve. Objectives don't necessarily have to be met, but we should work towards them. For example, like becoming a good man, it's okay if we don't succeed, but we should strive towards that direction. So, what are the common objectives of various financial regulators in Hong Kong? Common objectives refer to those shared by all regulatory authorities, including the Securities and Futures Commission, the Monetary Authority, the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Authority, and others. And what are the objectives? First, help to maintain Hong Kong's position as a leading financial center. How to do it? By applying necessary regulations for the purpose of proper supervision of the financial markets. What does necessary regulations mean? It means essential, not too much, not too little, just right. Second, it's essential to make the market market-friendly, open and approachable, but also fair and effective. Third, being a financial center, Hong Kong must have financial regulations of an acceptable international standard. Fourth, also, there should be a certain, adequate and fairly enforced legal framework of financial regulation. For example, Securities and Futures Ordinance was drafted with these objectives in mind. Fifth, encourage the installation of a sound technical infrastructure. Besides having rules, there must be infrastructure in place for operations, such as for the functioning of the financial markets and for interlinking with settlement and clearing systems globally. Lastly, help promoting confidence in the financial markets internationally and locally. Why is confidence so important? As a financial center, in order to promote trades and services, it requires a certain level of trust and confidence. We know that financial institutions have 6 main objectives, but what direction should they take, where should they start, and what methods should they use? Let me explain to you now some methods that can be used. In Hong Kong, there are 2 regulatory philosophies for financial supervision: disclosure-based and merit-based systems. Remember that these are only concepts and not substantive actions, simply words that indicate our direction. So what does disclosure-based mean? It means that through regulatory systems, information about investment instruments should be fully disclosed and provided. In simple terms, it means exposing one's strengths and weaknesses to investors or partners, clearly stating potential advantages, disadvantages, flaws, characteristics, and so on. It's like on a dating website, where your profile clearly states your relevant information, such as driving a sports car, living in a luxurious house, and being a civil servant. But you also reveal that you have a gambling problem and are unfaithful. By clearly stating your pros and cons, if someone still chooses to be with you, then any problems that arise are their own responsibility, and that's what disclosure-based means. After many companies go public, they often release numerous announcements and annual reports to the stock exchange, disclosing their financial situation and future goals, which is adopting the disclosure-based concept. If you want to know how a particular company is doing and who its directors are, you can conduct a company search at the company registry to learn about the company's situation. The Hong Kong financial regulatory system has 2 main principles: merit regulation and disclosure-based regulation. What does merit regulation mean? It aims to screen out undesirable players and offerings. In the market, there are good investments and bad investments, and this regulatory principle is designed to weed out bad investments. It's like how there are good men and bad men, right? Merit regulation is like how your mom picks a spouse for you. She's already screened their character, background, and occupation before you even meet them. The financial regulation system in Hong Kong also follows the merit regulation principle. For example, before a company can go public, it must undergo various tests. If it does not meet the standards and fails the tests, the company cannot be listed, and investors will not be able to invest in it. This is called merit regulation. It's like how your mom helps you pick a spouse. That's also called merit regulation. Remember, both principles are concepts, not actual actions. As mentioned earlier, before going public, we may use merit-based regulation to determine whether a company meets the standards, but after it goes public, we focus on disclosure-based regulation. Therefore, in general, Hong Kong's financial regulation incorporates both disclosure-based regulation and merit-based regulation. The Hong Kong financial regulatory system has two main concepts. One is called disclosure-based, and the other is called merit-based. It is important to remember that both are concepts and not necessarily substantive actions, and there is no clear-cut distinction between the two regulatory approaches. In practice, the two concepts often overlap. Before going public, merit-based regulation may be used to screen out bad investments and protect investors from harm. This is like a mother helping her child choose a spouse, sifting out the people who are fickle or addicted to gambling. After going public, disclosure-based regulation is emphasized. This involves requiring investment instruments to make detailed disclosures so that investors can make informed decisions and take responsibility for their choices. This is like discussing one's financial status before marriage to ensure both parties are aware of each other's circumstances. In summary, Hong Kong's financial regulatory system has both disclosure-based and merit-based approaches, which often overlap in practice. Often we hear the term risk-based in relation to regulation. What exactly does risk-based mean? It is essentially a regulatory concept. Remember, whose regulatory concept is this? This is the regulatory concept of the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, which they emphasize. What does risk-based mean? In simpler terms, it means identifying the location of risks, addressing them accordingly, treating the head when it aches, and treating the foot when it hurts, and not interfering when unnecessary. We only take targeted measures. For example, when an incident occurs and we find that there are problems in 3 areas, we will first address the area with the biggest problem. This follows the to treat only where the pain is approach. How did the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, and the Securities and Futures Ordinance come into being? In 1973, there was an intention to establish several new exchanges in the market, which drew the authorities' attention to the issue of lack of regulation for the exchanges. The market crash in March of the same year also stimulated the authorities to introduce new regulatory measures, leading to the implementation of a series of laws and the establishment of regulatory bodies. In 1987, a global market crash occurred, which caused the Hong Kong market to close for 4 days. Why was the market closed for 4 days? It was because the chairman of SEC, the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong, Ronald Lee Fu-chiu, announced the closure. However, he was later discovered to be involved in many speculative activities, with numerous conflicts of interest, and profited at the expense of investors. As a result, the government felt that the stock exchange could no longer serve as a regulatory body. Therefore, the government consulted with Ian Hay Davison to review the securities market and the exchange, aiming to make some changes and adjustments to create a more stable, orderly, efficient, and fair market. What is Harvey Davidson's position? Davidson believes that exchanges and regulatory authorities should be separated. Before the stock market crash in 1987, Hong Kong had no Securities and Futures Commission, SFC. To repeat, there was no SFC before 1987. In the past, everything related to the securities and futures industry and the stock market was managed by the exchanges, just like in the TV series The Greed of Man. Seeing this situation, Davidson believed that we must find someone to be responsible for operating the securities market. However, while operating, they should not manage it themselves, but find an independent institution to manage it. Therefore, the SFC was established to take on this role. So, are government officials knowledgeable about managing the securities market? They are not. Previously, the exchanges handled everything themselves, and government personnel did not know how to manage securities businesses. In such a hurry, where can they find these people to come back and do it? As a result, Davison suggested recruiting industry insiders as SFC staff because they specialize in this industry and understand its shortcomings and characteristics. Establish a practitioner-based regulatory system, supervise the Hong Kong securities market from the perspective of industry insiders, ensure that the market is stable, orderly, fair, free from manipulation, free from fraud, and provide sufficient investor protection. The structure recommended by Davison has been functioning effectively since 1989 and remains unchanged. Who appoints the senior management of the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC? Remember, the chairman, deputy chairman, chief executive officer, and directors, including executive and non-executive directors, are all appointed by the chief executive of the XAR. The current chief executive is John Lee Ka-chiu, so remember that he is the one making the appointments. Apart from appointing the senior management of the SFC, what other powers does the chief executive of the XAR have over the SFC? The chief executive of the XAR can remove any director of the SFC and determine the terms and conditions of office. Moreover, the chief executive can issue written instructions, i.e., give orders to the SFC, telling the SFC what to do. Additionally, like other organizations, the SFC must submit estimates of its income and expenditure for the coming financial year to the chief executive and ask for approval. After that, it will be sent to the financial secretary, who will then bring it to the Legislative Council for approval. Keep in mind that so far this is just an estimate of SFC income and expenditure. In simpler terms, all orders that the SFC has to follow come from the chief executive. Whether there is money available and whether the SFC's funds can be used are subject to the approval of the chief executive and then the Legislative Council. Remember, the relationship between the chief executive and the SFC mainly involves matters before actions are taken, in other words, preparatory work. As we all know, the primary responsibility of the financial secretary is to oversee the development and implementation of financial and economic policies. But what is the relationship between the financial secretary and the SFC? Earlier it was mentioned that the chief executive is responsible for the SFC's preparatory work, while the financial secretary is responsible for the SFC's follow-up work. Every year, the SFC has to submit 2 reports to the financial secretary. The first can be considered as a work report. The financial secretary can require the SFC to provide information on the principles, practices, and policy it is applying in order to meet its objectives and perform its functions. The second report is the SFC's annual report and financial statements, which indicate how much money the SFC has spent and whether it has made a profit or a loss. This information must also be submitted to the financial secretary. After reviewing the reports, the financial secretary will submit them to the Legislative Council. The financial secretary may request that the SFC provides information related to securities and futures industry affairs. If problematic situations occur, the financial secretary also has the right to appoint inspectors and investigators to handle and provide opinions. In summary, the financial secretary is responsible for the SFC's follow-up work. Apart from the SFC, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, HKMA, is also one of the important financial regulatory bodies in Hong Kong. So, what are the functions of the HKMA? In fact, the HKMA mainly has 3 functions. Firstly, it is to maintain currency stability. When you think of Hong Kong's currency, what comes to mind first? It's the linked exchange rate. How does the HKMA maintain monetary stability? It is by ensuring that the Hong Kong dollar exchange rate is maintained at a certain level. Because of this linked exchange rate, there needs to be a foreign exchange fund. Who is responsible for this fund? It is the HKMA's responsibility, and this is the second important function of the HKMA. Thirdly, the HKMA needs to supervise the banking system. What does this include? It involves issuing licenses to banks, regulating how much money banks can lend, and monitoring the mortgage interest rates offered by banks. All of these are under the supervision of the HKMA. Does the HKMA regulate the securities industry? Remember, the HKMA does not regulate the securities industry. It is a financial regulatory agency, but it only concerns money and the banking system. You may ask, is there any connection between the HKMA and the SFC? Yes, there is. Earlier, it was mentioned that the HKMA only regulates money and the banking system. However, Hong Kong banks also engage in securities business, so the connection between the HKMA and the SFC mainly relates to the supervision of banks. Alright, what is the relationship between the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, HKMA, and the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC? As we have mentioned before, the SFC is responsible for regulating the securities and futures industry, while the HKMA is responsible for regulating money and banking. So, when you see securities firms, are they banks? Generally, securities firms and fund companies are not banks. Since they are not banks, are they under the supervision of the HKMA? No. So, who regulates them? The answer is the SFC. If you are a securities firm and want to apply for a license to conduct securities and futures business, you need to submit an application to the SFC for approval and supervision. However, as you may know, many banks also offer stock trading services. You might think that since banks are regulated by the HKMA, does that mean that the HKMA regulates their stock trading activities? First of all, we need to understand that banks are regulated by the HKMA, which issues licenses to them. So, if a bank wants to conduct securities and futures business, they also need to submit an application to the HKMA to let them know of their intention. After the HKMA has reviewed and approved the application, if they believe that the bank is suitable for conducting securities and futures business, they will inform the SFC. Then, the SFC will help the bank register as a registered institution, and these registered institutions can engage in securities and futures activities. But who regulates these registered institutions? The HKMA and the SFC jointly regulate these institutions. Although they jointly regulate them, the HKMA plays a leading role as a frontline regulator. Both the HKMA and the SFC refer to SFC criteria for supervision, such as the fit and proper criteria. In summary, after a bank is registered, it is called a registered institution. When you see the term registered institution, you know that they must have banking business and are primarily regulated by the HKMA. What are the penalties when a registered institution commits a violation? How should the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, HKMA, handle it? Firstly, the HKMA will submit the relevant case to the SFC so that the SFC can be aware of the issue. Then, the SFC will directly review the bank involved in the suspected malpractice and investigate whether there are any irregularities. Depending on the circumstances, the SFC can choose different ways to handle it, such as temporarily or permanently revoking the bank's registration, issuing public or private reprimands, imposing fines on the bank or even the bank's employees involved. After hearing this, it seems like the SFC has taken care of everything. However, the HKMA can temporarily or permanently remove the names of relevant employees under the banking ordinance. Why? Because only the persons named in that register may carry out SFC-regulated activities. In fact, both the HKMA and the SFC have signed a Memorandum of Understanding, which clearly states their roles and responsibilities, so as to minimize overlaps under the regulatory regime. Okay, the insurance industry is an important part of Hong Kong's financial sector. So, who is responsible for regulating the insurance industry? It is the insurance authority that plays this role and is responsible for regulating and supervising the entire insurance industry in Hong Kong. What does the insurance authority actually do, and what powers does it have? Firstly, it issues licenses for
insurance intermediaries.
What are insurance intermediaries? These are licensed insurance brokers and agents. Secondly, it conducts supervision and investigations. The insurance authority has the power to commence prosecutions and can even discipline regulated individuals who engage in improper conduct, including imposing fines. Therefore, remember that when it comes to insurance matters, whether it is licensing, supervision, or investigations, it is all handled by the insurance authority. Before explaining the Mandatory Provident Fund Authority, MPFA, I want you to understand what is Mandatory Provident Fund schemes and why it's important. As a worker, you should be familiar with the MPF scheme, which is a retirement protection plan that requires both employers and employees to make contributions. All employers must establish a plan for employees who have not yet been covered by other personal plans. Simply put, the plan you are currently contributing to for your retirement is related to whether your employer is contributing and how much money is in the MPF account. There are many MPF schemes available on the market for employees to join, including money market funds, guaranteed funds, bond funds, and so on. It's important to remember that you must distinguish between the Mandatory Provident Fund Scheme and the Mandatory Provident Fund products. They are different, and they are regulated by different authorities, so you need to be mindful of this. As mentioned before, the MPF scheme is about retirement plans, specifically whether your employer has contributed to your fund and how much money is in your MPF account. For example, the China Life MPF Master Trust Scheme is the MPF scheme. So, what are MPF products? Within an MPF scheme, there are many different funds available for you to choose from. These funds are called MPF products, such as the China Life Guaranteed Return Fund and the China Life Hong Kong Equity Fund, which are both part of the China Life MPF Master Trust Scheme and are available for selection. So, are you contributing to the MPF scheme or to a MPF product? Remember, you are contributing to the MPF scheme, and the fund you are contributing to is called the MPF product. It's crucial to distinguish between the two because they are regulated by different authorities. So, what does the MPFA, Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Authority, have to do? First, registering MPF, Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes. As mentioned before, MPF schemes are contribution plans made by employers, such as HSBC MPF, Bacom MPF, etc., and MPFA is responsible for registering these plans. Second, approving pooled investment funds that can be used for investment purposes by investors once authorized. Third, handling MPF-related administrative matters, overseeing and making rules and guidelines, such as checking whether employers have completed necessary documents for their employees. Fourth, ongoing monitoring of MPF products to ensure they comply with MPF schemes ordinances. As mentioned before, MPF products refer to the funds within MPF schemes, and MPFA needs to check if they comply with MPF schemes ordinances. Fifth, an important task is to investigate alleged breaches of the provisions of the MPF schemes ordinances, such as checking whether employers have made contributions on time, whether they have contributed the correct amount, whether there are any MPF-related frauds or deceptions by trustees. Remember, this is an investigation of MPF schemes, not the products within the schemes. Sixth, approving trustees and regulating affairs and activities of such approved trustees. What is a trustee? It refers to the MPF companies selected to manage the funds within the MPF scheme. Can anyone become a trustee? No, approval from MPFA is required to become an approved trustee. Additionally, MPFA also regulates the activities of trustees to prevent any misconduct. Finally, although there are regulations, what if you encounter a suspicious trustee? You can contact MPFA. They handle complaints related to MPF products and approved trustees. Remember that MPF is not securities or futures. We are currently studying securities and futures, so what does MPFA have to do with the SFC? What is the relationship between the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, and the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Authority, MPFA? Before we begin, let me remind you again, MPF scheme is a plan that employers contribute to, while MPF products refer to the funds within the plan. So who is responsible for the MPF products? That would be the SFC. What role does the SFC play and what tasks does it undertake? Let's explain below. First, the SFC is responsible for vetting and authorizing MPF products and related marketing materials. Whether it's launching an MPF product or publishing sales documents and promotional materials, all must be approved by the SFC. What does this mean? If you want to advertise an MPF product under an MPF scheme, promote it or release promotional information, such as how the company can outperform its peers or how the company's fund performance is, it's all under the jurisdiction of the SFC, not the MPFA. Second, the SFC registers and approves investment managers for MPF products and continuously monitors their conduct in the investment management of MPF products. As we know, these MPF products are various types of funds that require people to manage and make investment decisions. Can anyone become an investment manager? No. Investment managers need to be registered. Where do they register? The SFC issues licenses. After issuing licenses, the SFC also needs to continuously monitor the conduct of investment managers to see if there are any issues. Therefore, the third responsibility of the SFC is to supervise the activities of investment advisors and securities dealers providing services in respect of MPF products. Because investment advisors and securities dealers operate MPF products, they are related to securities and futures trading, and therefore, they are monitored by the SFC. Okay, besides approval and monitoring, what else does the SFC have to do? The fourth task of the SFC is to investigate alleged breaches of the provisions of the SFC Code on MPF products and any relevant ordinances, and taking enforcement action. Fifthly, the SFC is responsible for handling complaints submitted by the MPF authority or the public. What are the complaints about? They are about MPF products or SFC licensed persons engaged in the investment management of these products. Remember, the SFC only focuses on MPF products. Other matters related to MPF schemes have nothing to do with the SFC. Similarly, the SFC and the MPF Authority have signed a Memorandum of Understanding to coordinate their work and fulfill their respective duties properly. The Chinese Gold and Silver Exchange Society, CGSE, is one of the regulatory bodies in the Hong Kong financial system. Let me briefly introduce the background of the CGSE. It mainly engages in bullion trading in 99-tail gold and kilo gold, and operates a premium system to cover two issues: firstly, delayed deliveries, and secondly, transfers of ownership between traders and investors. After introducing the background of the CGSE, the following must be remembered. The CGSE is not regulated directly, so it is also not regulated by the SFC. In simple terms, this place has no direct regulation. Without direct regulation, what is the relationship between the CGSE and the SFC? Under the CGSE, there is a collective investment scheme called the paper gold schemes. SFC has responsibility for authorizing such schemes and approving advertisements relating to them. To repeat the key points, the CGSE is not regulated by the SFC, and the SFC only manages the paper gold schemes under the CGSE, acting as a regulatory role. Speaking of Hong Kong's regulatory framework, we cannot ignore the Registrar of Companies. I believe everyone is familiar with this name, but what does the Registrar of Companies do? In simple terms, its main responsibility is to administer the following ordinances. For example, Companies Ordinance, Limited Partnerships Ordinance, Limited Partnership Fund Ordinance, Trustee Ordinance, Registered Trustees Incorporation Ordinance, Moneylenders Ordinance, and so on. When studying, try to remember these names as much as possible. Apart from enforcing specific legislation, what does the company's registry do? The company's registry maintains and makes available for public inspection financial and other returns, charges registered by companies, and so on. In simple terms, the company's registry is like a museum of companies. If a company is registered in Hong Kong, its submitted documents can be found through the company's registry. For example, information on the company's directors, establishment date, etc. can be obtained. By conducting a company search at the company's registry, the public can obtain information about a company. Okay, just mention the company's registry is responsible for maintaining submitted company documents, right? So what happens if a company does not cooperate and fails to submit the required forms? The company's registry has a responsibility to follow up defaults. What will they do? The company's registry has the power to strike off companies for failure to make returns or for not carrying on business. It's like a mom revoking a child's video game privileges for not completing their homework. Remember, the company's registry does not directly regulate companies. This is handled by different bodies. The company's registry takes an active interest in corporate governance issues and may make recommendations. The company's registry and the SFC have no direct connection in terms of regulatory areas. The full name of SFC is Securities and Futures Commission. The SFC was established in 1989 under the SFC Ordinance. It is important to note that the SFC is an independent organization and is not a part of the government machinery of the civil service. Although the SFC is not a part of the government machinery of the civil service, it still reports to and is accountable to the Financial Secretary. What are the objectives of the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC? Remember that not being able to achieve the goals is not important, but we try our best to work towards these goals. What are they? First, to maintain and promote the fairness, efficiency, competitiveness, transparency, and orderliness of the market. How to achieve these goals? Promote the public's understanding of the industry, including how it operates, and enhance transparency. What else? Provide protection to the investing public. How to protect investors? By minimizing crimes and misconduct in the market so that investors can avoid being harmed. Reduce systemic risks in the industry and assist the Financial Secretary in maintaining the stability of Hong Kong's financial sector. These are the regulatory objectives of the SFC. So who does the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, regulate? It can be divided into two main categories. The first category includes institutions or individuals recognized by the SFC. What does this include? Recognized exchanges, which are G. ISE HKJ, the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong, and IHKFEJ, the Hong Kong Futures Exchange. But how about IHKEXJ, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing? Pay attention, we call it HKEXJ. Exchange controllers. Here. Is it a bit confusing? Let me repeat it briefly. Both ISE HKJ and IHKFEJ are recognized exchanges. Who owns them? That would be HKEX. Exchange controllers. And the SFC regulates both recognized exchanges and exchange controllers. That is, both the mother and the child, the SFC regulates them both. Since the SFC already regulates exchanges, of course, it also regulates clearinghouses. In addition, the SFC also manages some investor compensation companies, which are the type of companies that provide services for the investment compensation fund that you often hear about. The SFC also needs to supervise individuals and companies engaged in securities and futures activities. For example, intermediaries who get paid to do things for others are also regulated by the SFC. The second category is registered institutions that are regulated or to be regulated by the SFC under any relevant provisions. What are the functions of the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC? Well, when we talk about functions, it's important to remember that they are serious things that need to be done. What are they? Firstly, the SFC needs to take appropriate steps to achieve its objectives. What are they? One of the SFC's objectives is to minimize crime and misconduct in the market. Therefore, the SFC ensures that those who carry on regulated activities have proper conduct, competence, and integrity. At the same time, the SFC is responsible for suppressing illegal, dishonorable, and improper practices in the securities and futures industry. In addition, in order to achieve the objective of reducing systemic risks in the industry, the SFC has a responsibility to ensure that intermediaries adopt internal control and risk management systems. Not only does the SFC aim to reduce risk, but it also aims to maintain financial stability. Therefore, the SFC has a responsibility to cooperate with and provide assistance to other regulators. Which regulatory bodies cooperate with the SFC? For example, the HKMA, MPFA, CGSE, and so on. As for how the SFC cooperates with them, you can refer back to the previous topic. The SFC also has a responsibility to secure an appropriate degree of protection for the investing public and to maintain and promote confidence in the securities and futures industry. As mentioned earlier, setting objectives is about working towards those objectives. The SFC's functions are the same and are about how to achieve regulatory objectives. Therefore, the functions and objectives of the SFC are very similar. What are the other functions of the SFC? The main function is to promote investor awareness of finance, including promoting investor education, investors' understanding of investment products, educating investors on the importance of making informed investment decisions, and helping investors understand the benefits of purchasing financial services through regulated persons. What are the general duties of the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC? Well, we often say the SFC's duties is to assist in maintaining Hong Kong's position as an international financial center. But how to maintain it? The SFC must facilitate innovation in financial products, avoid restrictions on competition, act in an open and transparent manner, and use its resources efficiently. The SFC has certain functions that may not delegate to others. What does this mean? Simply put, it means that the SFC cannot delegate its responsibilities to others and must carry them out by itself. What are the functions? First, the SFC has the power to establish subsidiary legislation, which includes the client securities rules, client money rules, keeping of records rules, and so on. These rules are called subsidiary legislation. Violating them is considered breaking the law. The SFC is the only organization that has the power to establish this type of legislation. Second, the SFC may establish committees to handle certain matters in accordance with the law. Again, only the SFC can do this, and it cannot be delegated to other organizations. Third, the SFC has the power to withdraw exchange companies, which means revoking its recognition as a stock exchange company and ordering it to suspend operations. In other words, the SFC can shut down a stock exchange company. Fourth, the SFC has the ability to appoint external investigators. Although it is said that the SFC cannot delegate tasks to third parties, when the SFC appoints external investigators to handle a case, they cannot be delegated to other parties. Fifth, the SFC has the power to institute proceedings in the MMT, Market Misconduct Tribunal. As mentioned earlier, the SFC's duty is to prevent market misconduct such as insider trading and false trading, so the SFC has the power to institute proceedings for cases of misconduct. It is important to note that the above 5 points are unique functions of the SFC and cannot be delegated to third parties. The SFC cannot shirk its responsibilities. The directors of the SFC, Securities and Futures Commission, which refers to the senior management of the SFC, are basically appointed by the chief executive of the CSAR. The SFC's board of directors consists of a non-executive chairman, a CEO, chief executive officer, as well as other executive directors and non-executive directors. The majority of SFC directors must be non-executive directors who are prominent persons from the industry or the legal and accountancy professions. The SFC may in addition employ such staff as it considers appropriate. Hey, remember that there are many divisions and branches within the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, and one of those branches is called the Advisory Committee. We often hear the word advisory. What does it mean? It means chit-chatting, having tea or a meal together. So, does the Advisory Committee actually do anything? It doesn't take any action because it doesn't have any executive power, nor does it police the SFC. Then what is its main job? Its main job is to provide opinions and advice to the SFC and to assist in decision-making. It only consults on SFC's internal corporate governance. Which other committees have similar functions? The Audit Committee, Finance and Budget Committee, Remuneration Committee, and Investment Committee all have similar functions. They only provide opinions and advice to the SFC on internal corporate governance and do not have any executive power. Okay, so what is the Regulatory Committee? Actually, the Regulatory Committee is similar to the Advisory Committee. They won't handle administrative work. What does the Regulatory Committee do? Some of their responsibilities include: the Takeovers and Mergers Panel is responsible for the codes on takeovers and mergers and share buybacks. If you think a decision is unfair or too strict, is there somewhere you can appeal? Yes, there is an Takeovers Appeal Committee. That allows you to appeal against the disciplinary rulings of the Takeovers and Mergers Panel. The Product Advisory Committee mainly advises on matters such as looking at new products in the market and suggesting new rules to regulate these new products. The Investor Compensation Fund Committee administers the Investor Compensation Fund and regulates its procedures. The Academic and Accreditation Advisory Committee is related to education. Its main role is to approve industry-based courses and examinations for meeting the licensing competence requirements. In other words, are the course contents applicable and up-to-date, and are the exam questions sufficient to evaluate whether the candidates are qualified to obtain a license, like the Education Bureau in the securities industry? The Share Registrar's Disciplinary Committee hears and determines disciplinary matters of some share registrars. What is a share registrar? A share registrar handles matters related to the register of members such as Computershare. In summary, these regulatory committees are mainly responsible for providing opinions and assisting in decision-making. They don't handle administrative work. In addition to the regulatory committees and advisory committees we mentioned earlier, there are also independent tribunals and panels separate from the SFC. It is important to note that these tribunals and panels are independent of the SFC, which means they do not belong to the SFC. Why don't they belong to the SFC? This is because they are used to balance or review the SFC's procedures, in simpler terms, to monitor the SFC. What are some of these tribunals and panels? First, there is the Securities and Futures Appeals Tribunal, SFAT. From the word tribunal, you can tell it is involved in adjudicating. What does it adjudicate? It reviews decisions made under the SFO, Securities of Futures Ordinance, such as licensing or registration of intermediaries and new listing applications on the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong. At the same time, it also reviews decisions made by the Investor Compensation Company Limited, conducting hearings and rendering decisions. If the SFC doesn't grant you a license and you think it's unfair, you can appeal to the SFAT. The Leveraged Foreign Exchange Trading Arbitration Panel specifically handles disputes related to leveraged foreign exchange trading, such as disputes between corporations licensed by the SFC for carrying out leveraged foreign exchange trading and their clients. This committee will appoint arbitrators to conduct hearings. The Process Review Panel for the Securities and Futures Commission reviews the internal operating procedures of the SFC. In simpler terms, it checks whether the SFC's operating procedures are fair, just, reasonable, systematic, and effective, ensuring it follows internal procedures. This Independent body is appointed by the chief executive of the CSAR and reports to the financial secretary. The primary purpose is to provide adequate checks and balances to the SFC. As we all know, the SFC's functions and powers are extensive, and the entire structure is massive. To avoid concentrating power, we need these three tribunals and panels to balance the SFC, so they are not part of the SFC. Previously mentioned committees do not handle administrative work, but are mainly responsible for providing opinions or conducting reviews. So who is responsible for carrying out the administrative work? In fact, there are 5 divisions within the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, that are responsible for it. Are these 5 divisions part of the SFC? Remember, they are all part of the SFC with executive powers. So which 5 divisions are included? First, the Corporate Finance Division. The main job of this department is to administer the codes on takeovers and mergers and share buybacks, monitor Hong Kong's listings and takeovers, and approve listings. At the same time, it also monitors the functions of the SEC, reviews the listing rules, reviews and authorizes prospectuses. Second, the Enforcement Division. In simpler terms, their job is to catch thieves. How do they catch them? They monitor market trading activities, investigate violations, and take enforcement actions against violators. That is, if there are intermediaries who are guilty of misconduct, it is the Enforcement Division's job to discipline them. Third, the Investment Products Division is responsible for regulating and approving investment products. That is, if you want to sell investment products in Hong Kong, you need to register with the Investment Products Division. After approval, they will also monitor whether the investment products are in compliance. Fourth, the Supervision of Markets Division. The duty of this division is not about monitoring the stock market going up or down, but to monitor the activities of major market operators, including exchanges, clearinghouses, approved share registers, controllers. Here we will remind again, is the HKEX considered as a recognized exchange? No. The HKEX is an exchange controller. The other most important division is the Intermediaries Division, which is mainly responsible for licensing and monitoring intermediaries. That is, after passing this exam, you become a licensed intermediary. Note that the Intermediaries Division is composed of the following 2 parts. First, the Licensing Department, which mainly conducts pre-licensing reviews and evaluates whether individuals who intend to enter the securities and futures industry meet the licensing requirements. Second, the Intermediary Supervision Department, which is mainly responsible for post-licensing supervision. That is, after licensing, they continue to monitor whether licensed corporations and individuals comply with regulations, such as whether they have submitted sufficient reports or completed the Continuous Professional Training (CPT) requirements. So remember, before licensing it is the Licensing Department, and after licensing it is the Intermediary Supervision Department, and together they form the Intermediaries Division. After listening to the 5 departments, you may think that the Enforcement Division, Supervision of Markets Division, and Intermediaries Division are all similar. So who will catch improper behavior? Well, it depends on who is acting improperly. If a financial tycoon manipulates the market with malicious intent, who will catch them? That would be the Enforcement Division, which catches thieves. If a licensed person deceives investors, who will they report to? That would be the Intermediaries Division. If the stock exchange is involved in wrongdoing, who will catch them? That would be the Market Surveillance Division. So you can see that this list clearly outlines the duties of each of the SFC divisions. How can the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, discipline intermediaries? Hey there, I want to ask you a question. Can the SFC discipline people and send them to jail? Well, the answer is no. Only a court can sentence someone to jail. However, if the SFC believes that you have violated the SFO, they have the right to investigate you. After the investigation, the SFC can impose the following penalties. If you are an intermediary and are registered or licensed, the SFC can suspend or revoke your license. The SFC also has the power to fine you or reprimand you. In addition, the SFC can apply to the court for an injunction to restrain anyone from dealing with his assets or even from conducting business. If a serious case is discovered, the SFC can submit it to the Commercial Crime Bureau, CCB, or the Independent Commission Against Corruption, ICAC, for further investigation. These are all things that the SFC can do. However, remember that the SFC cannot send anyone to jail. If they want someone to go to jail, they must go through the court system. After the trial, the court will decide whether or not one should go to jail, and that is the biggest difference. Also, if someone suffers losses due to improper market behavior, they can take civil action against the wrongdoer through the courts to obtain redress. The Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, has a lot of data in its hands. To whom can the SFC disclose the data? It turns out that the SFC can disclose data to government agencies as well as overseas authority or regulator generally of financial services. In other words, the SFC can disclose data to regulators in Hong Kong, mainland China, and overseas. Simply put, the government can disclose data to other governments or to officials in other countries. However, there is a major precondition. First, usually if it is in the public interest. Second, it is not against the public interest. The SFC must meet these two conditions before it can disclose data to the aforementioned parties. Here we will also introduce the IOSCO International Organization of Securities Commissions. In fact, you don't need to worry too much about it. Just know that every country has its own securities commission, and they have meetings to exchange information, have tea and snacks, and have a good time. Then, the IOSCO is responsible for promoting cooperation, implementing high standards of regulation, understanding the differences in securities regulations among global regulatory agencies, sharing information, and helping each other out. HKEX, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited. As mentioned before, let me clarify again, is the HKEX an exchange or not? No, it is not. Remember, the HKEX is an exchange controller, the mother company, and it has several subsidiary companies, which are like its children. These include the SEC, Stock Exchange of Hong Kong, HKFE, the Hong Kong Futures Exchange, and 3 clearing houses. What is the KEX's role? It is an exchange controller. As the exchange controller, it can control the recognized exchanges and clearing houses. What are the KEX's functions? To ensure the orderly and fair market in securities and futures contracts traded on or through the SEC and the HKFE, and to ensure risks are managed prudently. Importantly, if there is ever a conflict of interest between the investing public and the interests of a company or other parties, the public interest always takes priority. What are the differences between a stock exchange and a clearinghouse? What does a stock exchange do? Remember, a stock exchange only facilitates trading. SEC, the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong Limited, for example, handles securities trading, while the HKFE, Hong Kong Futures Exchange, handles futures trading. What about a clearinghouse? A clearinghouse is responsible for clearing and settlement. This means that after a trade is made, the parties involved settle up with the clearinghouse. If I agree to buy stocks from you, for example, I will send the money to the clearinghouse, and you will send the stocks to the clearinghouse for delivery to me. The clearinghouse is responsible for ensuring that the money and stocks are exchanged properly, not the exchanges. If, after we complete a trade, you refuse to deliver the stocks and want to back out, who would pursue you, the stock exchange or the clearinghouse? The clearinghouse would pursue you, since it is responsible for clearing and settlement. Why do we often hear about the HKEX going public? HKEX is the exchange controller and is essentially the parent company of the SEC. However, HKEX is also listed on SEC. Ordinary citizens can buy and sell shares. So both the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited, HKEX, and the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, need to carry out regulatory work. What are the differences in their jurisdiction? The biggest difference is in the frontline regulation. Remember, for those who have obtained a license or registered as intermediaries, their conduct is under the jurisdiction of the SFC, but not the HKEX. For example, whether these intermediaries have committed any crimes, treated their clients fairly, or followed the rules and regulations are not the responsibility of HKEX, but rather that of the SFC. What does the SFC do? The SFC is responsible for supervising and monitoring the activities of HKEX, the exchange companies, and the clearinghouses, as well as approving KEX's rules, fees, and administers as well as enforces the applicable legislation. What is HKEX responsible for? HKEX is responsible for managing the business risks of the HKEX, the exchanges, and the clearinghouses, as well as enforcing its own rules for listing, trading, clearing, and settlement. Simply put, it is like a mother who has to take care of herself, as well as her children. For example, whether the HKEX fees have been paid in full, whether the fees of the SEC or the HKFE have been paid in full, whether the rules of the trading system have been followed, and whether there are any issues with the trading computer system, are all managed by the HKEX. Okay, let's talk about the board of the HKEX, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited. Remember, the board of the HKEX is a mix of directors appointed by the government and those elected by the shareholders. And the board elects the chairman and appoints the chief executive. The board elects the chairman, and the next step is to submit to the chief executive of the XAR for approval, because the approval from the chief executive of the XAR is necessary. However, note that the chairman is not the one who actually does the work, but the person you often see in the news, which is the chief executive of the HKEX. The current chief executive of the HKEX is Nicholas Aguzin. Since the chief executive has to perform duties, approval must be obtained from the SFC, Securities and Futures Commission. Why? As we have mentioned before, the SFC is responsible for regulating recognized exchanges or exchange controllers. Based on this, the chief executive of the HKEX must be approved by the SFC. In short, the board of the HKEX is a mix of directors appointed by the government and those elected by the shareholders. And the board elects the chairman and appoints the chief executive, which the chairman must be approved by the chief executive of the XAR, while the chief executive has to be approved by the SFC. So what kind of people participate in Hong Kong's financial market, and what intermediaries are involved? The most common participants are retail investors. Who are the retail investors? They are individuals or small companies who invest for themselves rather than on behalf of anyone else. The retail investors generally invest small amounts and are less sophisticated, so they are the ones who most need regulatory protection. Again, why do the retail investors need protection? Because they may not understand the market well. There is a type of investor called high net worth individuals, or HNWIs for short. In simple terms, these are wealthy investors who are usually serviced by private banks. You may have heard of private banks such as Julius Baer, which cater to this type of clientele. Generally speaking, to become a private banking client, you need to have a certain level of assets, usually around $3 to $5 million. Because they are relatively wealthy, they may have more investment experience or knowledge compared to the average retail investor. They may also require less protection than the ordinary retail investor. How do we determine how much protection they need? The SFC can assess whether these high net worth individuals are considered professional investors based on specific criteria. We will discuss what constitutes a professional investor later. Another type of investor is called institutional investor. What is an institutional investor? As the name suggests, an institutional investor is a company or a legal group. This includes things like pension funds, unit trusts and mutual funds, insurance companies, and so on. Institutional investors usually invest on behalf of others. Therefore, any company in the financial industry or whose main business is investing is called an institutional investor. For this type of investor, we can understand that they do not need too much protection. Why is that? Because theoretically, they have professional investment knowledge and rich investment experience, so they also belong to professional investors. We have mentioned high net worth individuals and institutional investors, both of whom can be referred to as professional investors. Professional investor can be individuals or companies. Generally speaking, they are persons who are regarded as highly experienced in making investments and investment decisions. They have a thorough understanding of investments and are relatively wealthy. Due to this situation, professional investors require less protection. If you want to know how to define professional investors, we will explain it in more detail when we get to Chapter 5. We have mentioned high net worth individuals and institutional investors, both of whom can be referred to as professional investors. Professional investor can be individuals or companies. Generally speaking, they are persons who are regarded as highly experienced in making investments and investment decisions. They have a thorough understanding of investments and are relatively wealthy. Due to this situation, professional investors require less protection. If you want to know how to define professional investors, we will explain it in more detail when we get to Chapter 5. In addition to investors, intermediaries are also participants in the financial market. What is an intermediary? Remember, intermediaries are those who charge fees to provide products and services to investors and principals. What are some examples? Examples include securities dealers, futures traders, leveraged foreign exchange traders, financial advisors, asset and fund managers, investment banks, corporate financial advisors, credit rating agencies, securities margin financiers, share registrars, AFIs, financial consultants and planners, insurance brokers and agents, trustees and custodians, etc. So what is a principal? The principals refers to the persons who are ordering and acting for themselves. For example, if I ask a stockbroker to buy stocks for me, the stockbroker is the intermediary, and I am the principal. This is because I am the one who places the order, and the benefits of investment are related to me. The stockbroker, as a person who receives payment to do things for others, belongs to the category of intermediary. Simply put, the principal is the person who gives instructions to do things for themselves, while the intermediary is the person who receives payment to do things for others. Be sure not to confuse the two. Can the principal or intermediary belong to more than one category? Of course, it depends on the activities they engage in. The intermediary may act as the principal, and vice versa. The principal may also act as an agent. Apart from principals and intermediaries, the Hong Kong financial market also requires other professional support, including lawyers, accountants, auditors, and valuers, etc. They also provide services to the financial sectors and maintain the operation of the Hong Kong financial market. Speaking of professional support, lawyers are one of the important roles. In the financial market, there are various regulations and market participants heavily rely on lawyers to interpret financial regulations. Qualified lawyers are often invited to be professional members of regulatory bodies, providing professional opinions to assist in regulatory enforcement or revision of regulations and improve the operation of the financial system. Other professional support includes accountants and auditors. What are the differences between the two? Auditors are independent verifiers of the financial statements of companies. They report on whether the financial statements fairly represent the company's financial condition, and they are accountable to shareholders and other stakeholders. On the other hand, accountants typically are responsible for keeping proper records of transactions and of assets, including money and securities, but they are not responsible for auditing. What other participants are there in Hong Kong's financial market? One of them is company directors. So, we know that there are listed companies, and generally, they will have a position called company director. For example, Ng Yu Ming, the director of the retail chain Hui Tin Tong, whom we often see in television advertisements. Company directors are responsible for the company's accounts, so they need to understand the company's daily operations, decide on the company's accounting policies, and provide information to auditors for auditing. If the auditors have objections to the way the directors handle financial matters, they can express their opinions in the audit report. In addition, if the company does not perform well, the company directors are responsible. Other professional support also includes actuaries and valuers. There are also actuaries in Hong Kong who specialize in handling financial impacts caused by uncertain factors, which is particularly important for the insurance industry, such as determining how much one should pay in order to have certain insurance coverage. However, for this exam, actuaries are not a particularly important part. In addition, there are valuers, specializing in various fields, are called upon to substantiate asset and net asset valuations of corporate issues. Alright, the last one is financial analyst, who also provides professional support to Hong Kong's financial market. A financial analyst, also known as a research analyst or securities analyst, such as Lennon Chan, usually studies stocks, bonds, and so on. Financial analysts may be hired by clients, but more often they are employed by investment companies, investment banks, or insurance companies to analyze the financial market. Are you preparing for HKSI, MPFA, IIQE, EAQE, or SQE examinations? Look no further. At 2C Exam, we have everything you need to succeed. Our comprehensive suite of products and services includes premium online and offline question banks, personalized one-on-one tutorial sessions, tailored group classes, and private consultation sessions. Need assistance with licensing or examination inquiries? Don't hesitate to get in touch with our knowledgeable team. We're always here to help. We're open Monday to Friday, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. You can reach us by phone at 211-09644 or send us a message on WhatsApp at 934-72064. Need to send us a fax? Our fax number is 211-19644. Prefer email? Drop us a line at info@2cexam.com. And don't forget to connect with us on WeChat, HK2C Exam. Choose 2C Exam, your path to exam success. Reach out to us today and let us help you achieve your goals.